in graph theory. Okay. Yeah, so today we'll be learning about the representation of graphs, and then like how do we perform search operations in graph. I mean the depth first search and then the breadth first search, and then how can we find connected components using DFS or BFS. Like we can use either of them, and then how to check if a graph is bipartite or not. Like there are also some other things like how to find articulation points in a graph and how to find bridges in a graph. Those can also be done using simple BFS or DFS. But you know the explanation part is a bit tough. I mean it's not tough. It will take a longer amount of time. So like considering these contents, it's not possible to also put those things in today's session. So that's why I tried to skip those two things. But after learning all these things, you can just try. I mean, you can just try to Google what is articulation point and what is a bridge, and then you can see and then you can try coding it by your own, or maybe you can see the codes like they use this DFS and BFS only. So this is not a BST. This is a graph actually. Yeah. Yes, as you can see, there's a big definition of a graph. It says that they are mathematical structures that represent pairwise relationships between objects. And yeah, like as you already know, trees. Now trees are basically a subset of graphs. Okay, so trees are also graphs. So graph is basically a very, you can say, a very vast topic. Okay, it includes a lot of different things, and trees is a small part of it. Now what is the speciality of a tree is, like if I'm having n nodes in a tree, then there will always be n minus 1 edges. Okay, now what does that signify? It signifies that there is no cycle in my tree, I mean in my graph, you can say. So a graph without a cycle is basically a tree. So this is possibly the most short and crisp definition of a tree. So it's basically a graph without a cycle. So a graph having n nodes and having n minus 1 edges is a tree. But in general, it's not necessary that for n nodes I'll have n minus 1 edges. I can have any number of edges. I can have multiple edges between two nodes. I can even have cycles. I can have anything. Okay, so graph is a very complex structure. I mean, it in general can be very complex. Now, and like as I was talking about edges, so what does the edges represent? I mean, they represent some relation between two objects or two nodes. Like let us say the nodes are cities, for example, like city A to city B. So if there is a route from, I mean, if there is a route, let us say we are talking about a road route, okay, a road as a route. So if there exists a road from A to B, then let us say I connect A and B city. And say if there is a road from A to C, then I connect A and C. So, and also there can be a road from B to C. So these all edges basically represent that these two objects are related. Okay, and that relation can change from depending on the situation actually. So a graph is a flow structure that represents a relationship between various objects, and it can be visualized using the following two components, like the nodes and the edges. So these two are the very basic foundations of a graph. I mean, these two are the things which are actually used to form a graph. So nodes are the most important components in any graph, yeah. And nodes are the entities whose relationships are expressed using edges. So if a graph comprises of two nodes, say A and B, and let us say there is an undirected edge between them, then it expresses a bidirectional relationship between the nodes and edges. I mean, if let us say there is a city A and there is a city B, and city A and B are connected. So say if you are staying, I mean, say for example, if you are currently in city A, then you can go to city B, and also from city B you can go to city A. So that is something which is known as bidirectional relationship. But there also, but there can be also case in which you can only go from city A to B, but you cannot go from B to A. I mean, like there might be some restriction, okay, that you can only travel from one particular city to another city, but you cannot travel back. So that is something known as uh, like your unidirectional relationship. So it's not bidirectional. And now edges are the components that are used to represent the relationships. Okay, now let us say if A and B are two cities, and I represent uh, them in the form of a graph, and the edge length can be the length of, I mean, it can be the length of the road. Okay, like let us say it is like A and B is, let us say I mean, let us say there are two cities A and B, and or let us say there are let us say a source, I mean, let us say there is a source city and there is a destination city. So I mean, you can try to represent them in the form of a graph, and then you can try to signify the length of the edge as the distance between A and B. Like what is the distance from city A to city B. So that is one of the ways in which you can understand what an edge is. And also there are some types of nodes like a root node. I mean, its root node doesn't actually make sense in a graph, but why I included root node is because when we perform search algorithms, it is very it is very important, and it is very, you can say it is mandatory that you choose a node, and uh, you know just start assuming that it is a root node. Okay, I mean, though root is more, you can say it is more popularly used in trees. I mean, because it makes sense, because there are no cycles in a trees. But in a graph there are trees, I mean, there can be cycles. So the definition of root is not that strict, but it says the root node is the ancestor of all other nodes in a tree. So basically, a root node just signifies that it is the point from which your search, I mean, your depth first search or your breadth first search started. I mean, you just don't worry about it now. When we'll see like what exactly DFS and BFS are, then probably you'll get an idea what what exactly a root is. So root does not have any ancestor, and yeah, so each graph consists of exactly one root node. I mean, there cannot be two roots. So generally you yeah, so generally you must start traversing a graph from the root node. And what is a leaf node? So a leaf node represents the nodes that do not have any successors, and these nodes only have ancestor nodes. So as we saw in trees, the nodes which didn't have left and right child, we like classified them as leaf nodes. So the same definition goes here also. I mean, the nodes which don't have any successors are regarded as leaf nodes. And there, yeah, like they can have any number of incoming edges, but they don't have any outgoing edges. Now, what are incoming edges? Incoming edges are edges that come from the parent, and the outgoing edges that are the edges that go from a particular node to their children. Now, since leaf nodes don't have any children, so there aren't any outgoing edges. Okay, so now let us see what are the different types of graphs. Now, as I said, I talked about directed and undirected graphs. So let us see what is an undirected graph. So it says an undirected graph is a graph in which all the edges are bidirectional. That is, you can, like, say if you are standing at point one, then from one you can go to two as well. And also if you are standing at two, then from two you can also go to one. So this is something which signifies bidirectional edges. I mean, so this is something which is called a undirected graph. So in an undirected graph, the edges are usually bidirectional. Now, yeah, now if a graph is directed, as you can see, so here you can see like I can only travel from one to two. I mean, I can only travel from one to two in a single direction. Like if I'm standing at one, then I can go to two. But if I'm standing at two, then I cannot go to one directly. Okay. So this is something which is known as a directed graph, or it represents unidirectional edges. So the edges are represented with arrows, and the arrows have a particular direction. But in case of undirected graph, there are like we usually don't represent the edges with arrows because it's possible to go from one edge to another. I mean, and vice versa. So that's why. Now, yeah, like here, like we assume that all the edges are having equal weights. Now, what do we mean by weights? Let us say if you are standing at node number one, and say if you want to go to node number three. Okay, so what all paths you can take? You can like you can start from 1, go to 2, and then go to 3, or you can start from 1 and then take 4 as an intermediate node and then go to 3. So there are two different paths. So like what is the cost of traveling from 1 to 3? So it is, I mean, like you're taking two steps in both the possible scenes. I mean, in both the cases. But what if I tell you that the edges have a cost associated with them? So in that case, I'll have two different answers. Like I might have the, like the edge cost, like the edge connecting 1 and 2 with a cost, let us say 10 million, or let us say a very high cost, and the edges which connect 1 and 4 are relatively cheap, and also the edge which connects 4 and 3 is also relatively cheap. So rather than going from 1 to 2 and then from 2 to 3, you can take a path like from 1 to 4 and then from 4 to 3, because that would be relatively cheaper. So that is basically the concept of weighted graph. So in a weighted graph, each edge has a weight associated with it. So it is a undirected weighted graph, okay? Because I mean there is no direction associated with the edges, but it is weighted. So if you, like in this case, if you want to travel from 1 to 3, you can take three different paths. Like you can directly go from 1 to 3, or you can go like, or from 1 you can first go to 2 and then go to 3, or from 1 you can go to 4 and then from 4 you can go to 3. So you can calculate the cost, and like if I consider the path 1 to 3, then it is going to cost me 3. Now if I consider the direct path from 1 to 3, then the cost would be 1. And if I would take 4 as an intermediate node and like take the path 1 4 and 1 4 3, then it is going to cost me 5. So as you can see, the costs are different. So if I take the direct path from 1 to 3, it is going to cost me, like it would be the cheapest path, or it is going to cost me the least. So yeah. Now also there is something known as a cyclic graph. I mean, a graph is cyclic if it comprises of a, I mean, if it simply consists of a cycle. I mean, if there's a cycle in a graph, then we say that the graph is cyclic. And a cyclic graph is a graph that has no cycles. So a tree is always a cyclic graph, okay? Because there is no cycle in a tree. And it says that a tree is an undirected graph in which any two vertices are connected by only one path. Yeah. Like in this case, if I want to go from 1 to 5, for example, I can have only one path. I cannot have multiple paths. So to have multiple path is to have a cycle in a graph. So if I ask you like list me out the possibilities, I mean all the possible paths to go from one node to another node, and if there exists more than one possible path, then it always signifies that there exists a cycle in a graph. Otherwise, in a tree, there is only a unique path from one node to another node. Okay, this thing, I mean, I don't know whether it is covered in the trees part or not, but yeah, like if you don't know this, then you can definitely remember this fact that in a tree there is always a unique path from one node to another node, and it is easy to prove. I mean, I don't know how difficult it will be to prove, but you can also try proving. Maybe you can use mathematical induction. Maybe yeah, you can start from, like, it's obviously true for one node, then you can assume that it is true for, like, it is true for some k nodes, and then start proving for k plus 1 nodes. I think mathematical induction would work. Yeah. So 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 these are mostly the types of graphs. And then, like, how do we represent graphs? I mean, since like we talked a lot of theoretical stuff, but how do we actually represent it in our, I mean, in our codes? I mean, we need to find some way using which we can represent the graphs. So one of the very one of the very simplest ways I can say is to actually use a adjacency matrix, or you can consider it as a simple matrix. Okay. Now the adjacency term, I mean, it means that the nodes are the nodes which are adjacent to each other. Okay. So I mean, those are, I mean, if you see the matrix, the nodes which are adjacent to each other, like let us say there is a node I and there's a node J, and if they are connected by a H, so what I do is in the matrix at the ijth cell, I basically represent that value by 1, and else if there is no edge between say two nodes I and J, then the value is simply 0. So you can see it says an adjacent adjacency matrix is a V cross V matrix. So what is V? V is basically the number of vertices or the number of nodes. So if I'm having say n nodes in my graph, so there will be, so it will be a matrix of n cross n. And if I'm having V nodes in my graph, so it will be a matrix of V cross V. And it is a binary matrix, as the value can be 0 or it can be 1. And if the matrix is A, then each Aij, so the element Aij is 1 if there is an edge from vertex I to vertex j. Okay. And this is a direct edge. Okay. If there's a direct edge from I to j, then the value is 1, else it is 0. So yeah, so as you can see, this is something that you can actually see that the space complexity will be over V square. And this is something which is really costly. I mean, if I'm having, let us say, 10 to the power 5 nodes or 6 nodes, then it is going to cost me a space of 10 to the power 12. And it is practically not possible to create a matrix of size 10 to the power 12. Okay. I mean, you can probably create a maximum size of 10 to the power 7 or 8, I guess, depending on the though like there are some optimizers which can use to optimize the memory. I mean, sorry, they can be used to increase the memory a bit, but yeah, like you can assume that you cannot go beyond 10 to the power 7. It is like it happens very rarely that you can, like you're using a matrix of size 10 to the power 9 or 10, and you're still able to run your code in your computers, unless you are using parallel computing, or unless you are using supercomputers, then it's fine. But for a normal computer, it's like the limit is up to 10 to the power 6 or 10 to the power 7. So this is basically a shortcoming of this method of representation. I mean, it costs you some extra space, but yeah, like you can access the what you can say. I mean, or you can check whether there exists I mean, an edge between two nodes in constant time. I mean, say if I ask you, uh, like if I give you a graph, and and I tell you to construct the adjacency matrix of the graph, and then I ask you to check and just print or return whether there exists an edge between any two nodes. So that you can do in constant time, because you just have to access the Aij index, and that you can do in constant time. So though we can access the edges in constant time, I mean, or you can determine if there is an edge between two nodes in constant time, but the space complexity takes a big hit. So that's why. So this is actually not popular. I mean, this is not that popular because of the space constraint. So yeah, here you can see the adjacency matrix of the following graph. So basically, you are given a graph which looks something like this. Guys, can you please mute yourself, like, or if you have any doubt, you can ask. Insertion is also costly in this. Yeah, insertion will also be costly because, I mean, yeah, like you are just increasing another dimension. So say if I'm having a graph of let us say there were initially n nodes, so it will be a n cross n matrix, and now if I want to insert another node, then I will have to construct a n plus 1 cross n plus 1 matrix. So yeah, like insertion will also be costly. Yeah, because every time I increase a node, I increase one more dimension. So that's why. Uh, so here you can actually see that the adjacency matrix representation of this graph. So since there is no, I mean, since there is no edge from the node 1 to itself, I mean, there are no self edges. So that's why the all the diagonal values will be 0. I mean, the 1 1 index, I mean, the a11, a22, a33, a44 will be 0. But since there is an edge from 1 to 2, so you can see that a12 is 1, and also there is an edge from 2 to 1. So that's why a21 is 1. So basically, you can just see this. I mean, this is pretty simple. If like if there's an edge between any two nodes, then simply that index or that cell in the matrix is represented by the value 1, else it is represented by the value 0. And since the edges are not directional, they are bidirectional edges. They are not unidirectional. That's why the matrix will be symmetric. Okay. I mean, if there is an edge from I to j, then there is also an edge from j to I. So if aij is 1, then aji will also be 1. But here you can see, if I take a directed graph, then in this case, you can see that there is an edge from 1 to 2, but there is no edge from 2 to 1. So, so in my matrix, you can say that the cell 1 2 is 1, but the cell 2 1 is 0. Okay, so you can just give this matrix a look. I mean, for like in case of directed graphs, it's like it's not necessary that the matrix would be symmetric. I mean, though it can be symmetric if there are multiple edges, but it's usually not symmetric. But in case of undirected graph, it is always symmetric. Now let us see the adjacency list representation. So it says that the other way to represent a graph is by using an adjacency list. An adjacency list is an array A of separate lists. So each element of the array AI is a list. Okay. So it's basically you can say it's sort of it's actually an array of vectors, you can say, or yeah, like something like that. So each node, I mean, or you can say each index is basically a list. So you can say AI is A1 is a list, A2 is a list, and A3 is a list. So A1 basically contains all the nodes that are directly connected to node number one, and similarly A2 stores all the nodes that are directly connected to node number two, and similarly. So in this case, you can see the space complexity is V plus E, because I'm like for every vertex, I'm only storing the I mean the nodes which are directly connected to it. Okay, and I'm not storing the return, I mean the information which is not required to me. Like I'm only storing for every node the nodes which are directly connected to it, and that's it. I'm not storing, I mean, so basically you can see in this case we were having a lot of zeros. Okay, so like I mean the zeros are not necessary actually. What I need is like in which all indexes I'm having the values one, because they are going to represent that I can go from a particular node to another node. I mean, so I've got nothing to do with the zeros. So basically, adjacency list somehow tries to get rid of this extra zeros. So that's why it is in some way it is memory efficient, because it takes O of V plus E memory. So V is the number of vertices and E is the number of edges. So that's why adjacency list is something which is more popularly used, considering the fact that it is actually much more memory efficient compared to compared to adjacency matrix. Though in worst case, I mean, I don't know if you know this, that in a graph which is having V vertices, the number of edges in worst case can go up to V square. Okay, it is so here also you can see in worst case, my space complexity can go to O of V square, but generally we don't see such graphs. I mean, okay, so it is very rare to find such completely connected graphs in which there is an edge between each and every node. Okay, so it's actually very rare. So considering that, the adjacency lists are actually memory or space efficient. So yeah, so here you can see A1 is a adjacency list for node number one, and it stores the information of the nodes that are directly connected to it. So it stores the value 2 and 4. Similarly, 2 is directly connected to 1 and 3, so A2 stores the value 1 and 3. Similarly, 3 is connected to 2 and 4, so 3 stores the information uh, 2 and 4. Similarly, 4 is directly connected to 1 and 3, so it stores 1 and 3. Now this is about the undirected graph again. I mean, where the edges are bidirectional, but we can again have a case in which the edges are directional, or my graph is not I mean my graph is not bidirectional, rather my graph is unidirectional. So in this case, you can see A1 only contains two in its adjacency list, because from one I can only go to two directly. I cannot go to 3. Similarly, from 2, I can only go to 4, but I cannot go to 1. And similarly, from 3, I can go to 1 as well as I can go to 4. And also from 4, I can only go to 2. So this is basically the difference between directed and undirected graphs. Okay. So let us just try to see how we can code this. So let us take n as the number of nodes and e as the number of edges. So what I input, so let us ask the user to enter the number of nodes and the number of edges, and then I take the input of n and edges, and then what I do is I create a vector. So I create a vector, and so basically I create an array of vectors, you can say, which is having a size n plus 1. Okay, now I take input of all the connections, I mean between which two nodes I'm basically having the edges. So say if the nodes are a and b, so let us prompt the user to also, I don't think we shouldn't be printing this every time. Let us print it once outside the loop, and then what I do is I take the input of a, and then I take the input of b, and then after this what I do is I like in the adjacency list of a, I push b. I mean, I insert b in the adjacency list of a, and I also insert a in the adjacency list of a. Now what does this mean? So this means that my graph is bidirectional. Okay. Now I'm actually not pushing b into only a, but I'm also pushing a into the adjacency list of b. So basically, I'm assuming that my graph is bidirectional. But yeah, like if you like if your graph is directional, I mean if there is an edge from say you know a to b, then in that case you shouldn't be writing this code, I mean this line. You should only push b into the adjacency list of a. Okay, there is no need to push a into the adjacency list of b. But since my graph is not directed, it is an undirected graph, I mean from a I can go to b, and also from b I can go back to a, so that's why I'm inserting this. Now let us just print the adjacency list of every node. Okay, just to check, I mean, so for every node, say the number of nodes are n, and then for, let us print that the adjacency list of node I So whatever is there in the adjacency list of I simply print that. Okay. Let me just zoom it. Okay, so let us consider this example only. I mean, uh, the case. I mean, the graph which I mentioned in the PPT. So we are having four edges. I mean, we are having four nodes and we are having four edges. Okay. So enter the nodes which have an edge between them. So I have an edge between 1 and 2. I have an edge between 2 and 3. I have an edge between 3 and 4. I have an edge between 4 and 1. So you can see the adjacency list of node 1 looks something like this. It is having the values 2 and 4. The adjacency list of node 2 is having values 1 and 3. Similarly, 3 is having value 2 and 4. Like you can check from here, like 1 is connected to 2, 1 is connected to 4. So that's why 1 is having 2 and 4. Now 2 is connected to 1 and 2 is connected to 3. So 2 is having value 1 and 3. Similarly, 3 is connected to 2 and 3 is connected to 4. So that's why 3 is having values 2 and 4. And the same applies for the node which is having a value 4. Now, after doing this, what else we can do is, so after having learned this thing, I mean how to represent the graphs, let us see how to perform search operations in graph. I mean how to do breadth first search and how to do depth first search. Okay. So for that, probably I'll just uh, I'll just show this animation. I mean, okay, so what is basically depth first search? So in a depth first search, what we do is we simply start from a node, okay, and then we, like, it is very similar to that of recursion, okay. And I mean, and also a depth first search is implemented through recursion only. So that's why what you do is you start from any node, okay. Let us say, I mean, without loss of any generality, I'm just taking 0 as my starting node, or I'm considering 0 as my root node. Then what I do is I I basically take any node which is directly connected to 0. So I take 3 for example, and then from 3 I go to the node which is not visited yet and is directly connected to 3. So 3 is, so like from 0 I went to 3, then from 3 I can go to 0 as well as 1, but 0 is already visited because I started from 0. So I don't go back to 0 again, but rather I go to 1. Now similarly, from 1 I can go to 3 as well as I can go to 5, but 3 is already visited. So that's why from 1 I go to 5. Now from 5 I can go to 1, 6 and 7. So I don't go to 1 because 1 is already visited, but out of 6 and 7 I can choose any of them. Let us say I choose 6. Now from 5 I go to 6. Now similarly from 6 I can go to 5 and 4, but I don't go to 5 because 5 is already visited. So that's why from 6, let us say I go to 4. And now again from 4 I can go to 0, I can go to 6, or I can go to 7. But I don't go to 0 because 0 is already visited. Similarly, I don't go to 6 because 6 is already visited, but I go to 7. Now after going to 7, from 7 I can go to 5, or like from 7 I can also go to 4, but 4 is also visited and 5 is also visited. So from 7 I basically return from my DFS. I mean, my DFS call basically returns from here. I mean, from this part, and then I see from which part my DFS call was left. So basically from 1. So basically from 0 I called node number 3, but I could have also called for node number 2, or I could have also called for node number 4. So I just check whether they are visited or not. Like 4 is visited using another path, but 2 is not visited yet. So that's why from 0 I go to 2 and then I visit 2. So you can just watch it once. We can, like, we start from 0, then let us say we go to 2. So 2 is marked visited, and then we go back to 0, and then we see which node is not visited yet. So 3 was not visited. And then from 3, we can go to 1 because 1 is not visited. And then similarly from 1, we go to 5 because 5 is not visited. And similarly, then from 5, we go to node number 6 because 6 is not visited. Then from 6, we go to 4 because 4 is not visited yet. And then from 4, we don't go to 0 because 0 is already visited. Now from 4, we can rather go to 7 because 7 is not visited. So now from 7, there is no node that is left to be visited. So that's why I simply return back, or I simply trace back, because all the nodes are visited now. So I simply trace back. You can see like from 5 also I checked for 7, but 7 was already visited. So that's why I just, I mean, as we do in a recursion, we take a recursive, I mean, we do recursive calls, and then after all the calls are executed, then we simply return back to the root or the base call. So the same thing also happened here. Now let us try to implement it once. So for this, what we need to do is we need to maintain a visited vector. Okay, I mean, just to make sure that the nodes are not visited again. So say I create a size 100 vector and initialize it to false. So false means that the node is not yet visited. Now I create a DFS function. I pass the, let us say, the root node. And then what I do is, if the root node is visited, then I simply return from this function. Else what I do is I mark this node as visited. Let us say this is true. And then let us print this node. Okay. And then what I do is I go to each and every node which is directly connected to this. Okay, so probably I have to define this globally because I have to access this. So let us take the size 1000. And then I make a DFS call for every node which is directly connected to the root node. So after this, what I can do is I can simply call my DFS function from node number 1. Okay. So let us see what all values it prints, and also it should print every value once. So let us run this function. So there are 4 nodes and 4 edges, and then there. Yeah, so as I said, there's an edge between 1 and 2, and then there is an edge between 2 and 3, then there is an edge between 3 and 4, and then there's an edge between 4 and 1. So yeah, you can see it like it first prints the adjacency list for every node, and then it prints the DFS, the order in which my DFS function was called. Now we can do one thing. What I can do is I'll compile this. So let me just increase the, then I can run it again. But what this time what I'll do is I'll I'll just change the I mean I'll just change the I mean the input order. So first I'll input 1 and 4. Okay, I mean there is an edge between 1 and 4. Then I'll input 1 and 2. Okay, because there's an edge between 1 and 2. Then I'll input 2 and 3, and then I'll input then I'll input 3 and 4. So though it is the same graph, but depending on the order of input, you can see the DFS, I mean, the things that were printed before. So the order was 1, 2, 3, 4. So now you can see the order is 1, 4, 3, 2. So it is because of the fact that I stored first. I mean, in like in my like you can see in the second case, in the adjacency list of 1, I first stored 4. I mean the node with a value 4 first, and then the node with a value 2. So that's why it visited 4 first, and then the node with a value 2 after that. But in the previous case, what I did was I stored node number 2 in the adjacency list of 1 first, and then after that I stored the node number 4 in the adjacency list of 1. So that's why 2 was visited first and then 4. So that's why depending on the input, the DFS calls might change, but the overall complexity doesn't. So now let us see what is a breadth first search. Okay. So okay, just a second. Yeah. So in a breadth first search, what happens is from every node, like I travel like I try to uh, traverse this graph in a particular depth manner. Like, now what does it mean by depth manner? So first I start with, let us say, node number 0, and then after visiting that node, I go to all the nodes that are at a distance 1 from this node. Okay. And then after I mean, visiting all those nodes, then I visit all the nodes that are at a distance 2 from my root. So if my root node is 0, so initially what I do is I visit all the nodes that are at a distance 1 from this node. Okay. Or you can say one that are at a distance 1 from the node number 0. Then after that, I visit all the nodes which are at a distance 2 from the node 0. And then the nodes which are at a distance 3 from node 0, and so on. So basically, I'm trying to cover or you can say visit the nodes in a in a particular depth. I mean, so initially I visited the nodes which are at a which are at a depth 0, and then I am visiting the nodes which are at a depth 1, and then the nodes which are at a depth 2, and so on. So you can see if I run the BFS, and if I start from okay, just a second. So let me select 0, and then let us run it. So I can say from 0. So initially all the nodes that are at a distance 1 will be visited first. So the nodes which are at a distance 0, that are at a distance 1 from 0, are the nodes 1, 3, and 4. So first 1, 3, and 4 will be visited. Then after that, the nodes which are at a distance 2 from 0 will be visited. Like 2 is a distance 2 from 0. Then 5 is at a distance 2 from 0. Then after that, all the nodes that are at a value 3 from 0 will be visited, as you can see. 6 will be visited, yeah. So it is basically checking. I mean, as I said, that each node will be visited only once. So it is checking if the node is visited or not. Like if it is visited, then it doesn't go to that node and call BFS. I mean, the breadth first search again for that node. So as you saw, like from 0, the nodes which were at a distance 1 were actually the nodes 1, 3, and 4. So they were visited first, and then after that, the nodes 2, 5, and 7 were at a distance 2 from the node number 0, so they were visited after that. And then finally the node 6 was visited because it was at a distance 3 from 0. So now how do we implement this? I mean, because this seems a bit tricky because earlier we did a simple recursive call and it was like it traversed all through the depth of a node and then visited all the nodes. I mean, in that fashion. But if I have to implement breadth first search, then I have to use a data structure which is called queue, and then using queue data structure, I can easily implement this algorithm. Okay, so let us see how we can actually implement this. So let us check. Let us see how we can implement the you can say the BFS function. In this also I pass the root node, okay, and then what I do is I simply create a queue, say queue, and then in this queue I first push the root node, okay, and then what I basically try to do is I try to traverse through this queue until it is, unless it becomes empty. So as far as the elements in my queue, I can keep on traversing the queue. And then let us say this is my source node, which is at the front of the queue. And then after finding the source node, I simply pop this element from the queue. And then what I do is I mark this. I just check that if this node is visited or not. So if it is visited, then I simply continue. Else I mark this node as visited, like it is very similar to that of DFS. And then I print this. Then I print this node. Say the node is SRC. Okay, I print this node and then I do the same thing. Like I traverse through I traverse through the adjacency list of SRC, and then I simply push it into the queue. Okay, so basically what I did was I called my BFS function from the root, then I pushed root into the queue, and then I checked if my queue is not empty, then I basically saw the front element of the queue, and then I popped that element out from the queue, and then I checked that is that front element already visited. So if that front element is already visited, then I didn't do anything. I simply wrote continue, because I don't need to access the traverse through the adjacency list of that node because it is already visited. Or else what I did was I marked the SRC node as true. I marked it visited, and then I simply printed that node, and then I traversed through the adjacency list of that SRC node and pushed all the elements that were present in the SRC node into my queue. So let's not call BFS. Let's not call DFS. Let's call BFS. So I'll again use the same graph, 4 edges and four vertices and 4 edges. Then there is a edge from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and then 4 to 1. So can you just predict what will be the output? It will be something like, since I'm calling my BFS from 1, so first 1 will be printed. Now which nodes are at a distance 1 from this node number 1? So 2 is at a distance 1 from node number 1, and 4 is at a distance 1 from node number 1. So first 1 will be printed, then 2 and 4 will be printed, and then after that 3 will be printed, because 3 is at a distance 2 from node number 1. So yeah, so here you can see that first one was printed, then 2 and 4 were printed because they were at a distance 1 from node number 1, and then 3 is printed because it is at a distance 2 from node number 1. So this is about the BFS algorithm. I mean, it is also very similar to that of DFS, but yeah, I mean, in BFS we traverse in a in a breadth fashion. I mean, we try to first access the nodes that are at a distance 0 from the node, and then that are at a distance 1 from the node, and then the nodes that are at a distance 2 from the node, and so on. Okay, I mean, if you want to leave, you can. It's completely up to you. Yeah. So after this, what we can do is we can actually try to learn what is. Okay, so after this, basically we can just try to see what is connected components, because this is something that we can do using a BFS or a DFS. So now, what are exactly connected components? So I mean, if I simply go by the definition of a connected component, so if I say that that certain nodes are connected, so what I mean is basically like if I pick any node out of that component, then from that particular node I can visit all the nodes that are in that component. So if that holds true for every node in that component, then I say that particular that particular component as a connected component, because all the nodes can be can be visited from every other node. So if that happens, then I consider that component as a single connected component. Now I can have multiple connected components also, like I can have 2 3 different connected components and so on. So let us see how we can find out the number of different connected components. So basically I'll pick a question and then I'll start solving it. So let us do it. Yeah. So you can see it says that I'm given n, the total number of nodes in an undirected graph that are numbered from 1 to n, and then an integer, that is e, the total number of edges in the graph, and then basically I have to calculate the total number of connected components in the graph. So a connected component is a set of vertices in a graph that are linked to each other by paths. So here you can see the example. It says that there are 8 different nodes, and then there are 5 edges. So there is an edge between 1 and 2. There's an edge between 2 and 3, 2 and 4, 3 and 5, and 6 and 7. And I have to find out the number of different connected components. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so first what I do is I take so yeah. So first I define a graph, which is, let us say, having 1,000 nodes, for example. I think, or we can take more. I think we can take up to 10 to the power 5, maybe. Yeah, we can take something like this for safety purpose, and then I input n and e, and then I simply take a loop from 0 to e, and then input the nodes, and then add an edge between them. And let us say my answer is initially 0, and then what I do is I simply do a DFS call for all the nodes that are not visited yet. So I start from the root node, and then if I say that if it is visited, then I simply return, else I mark this root node as visited. I mean, so I mark it as true, and then for every node which is directly connected to this, I do a DFS call for this node X. And then I pick every node in a sequential manner. I mean, I'm having n nodes, and then I check if it is not visited yet. So if it is not visited yet, then it is going to add 1 to my answer because it will be a part of another, I mean, a new connected component. And then I simply do the DFS call for this. And then finally, I should be printing answer. Okay, so like it is giving the correct output for sample test cases. Let us try to submit it. So yeah, so the code got accepted. Like it was a pretty simple code to find the number of uh, different connected components. So you can either do it by using depth first search or a breadth first search. So it's completely up to you how you want to do it. Okay, so after this we can see what is a bipartite graph. So I just picked the definition from Wikipedia. So it says that in the mathematical field of graph theory, a bipartite graph is a graph whose vertices can be divided into two disjoint and independent sets U and V such that every edge connects a vertex in U to one in V. So basically there is no edge between the nodes that are present in set U, and there is also no edge between the edges which are present in set V. But there's an edge between nodes which are present in set U and V. Okay, so there'll be an edge connecting a node present in U to a node present in V. So vertex sets U and V are usually called the parts of the graph. Evidently, a bipartite graph is a graph that does not contain any odd length cycles, because this you can check that if my graph contains a cycle of odd length, then it can never be bipartite. Now the two sets U and V may be thought as a coloring of the graph with two colors. I mean, it is fairly easy to visualize with colors. So that's why we basically try to represent, or we try to picturize bipartite graphs using colors. So if one colors all nodes here, I mean in U blue and all nodes in V with green, then each edge has endpoints of different colors. So as is required in the graph coloring problem. So in contrast, such a coloring is impossible in case of a non-bipartite graph, such as a triangle. Okay, you can take a triangle because it is a cycle of odd length. There are three nodes in a triangle. So after one node is colored blue, another green, the third vertex of the triangle is connected to the vertices of both colors, preventing it being assigned from either color. So let us see this example. So as you can see here, these are the examples of bipartite graphs in which I can divide my graph into two different set of nodes such that there is no edge between nodes which are present in one set. I mean, the nodes which are present in set U have no edge between them, and the nodes which are present in set V have no edge between them. But yeah, there is an edge which connects a node present in U to a node which is present in V. And this is also a complete bipartite graph with m equals 5 and n equals 3. So you can see that there are 5 nodes in one set and there are 3 nodes in another set. So let us quickly try to solve a problem which uses bipartite graphs. Yeah. So the problem says Professor Hooper is researching the sexual behavior of rare species of bugs. He assumes that they they feature two different genders and that they only interact with bugs of the opposite gender. In his experiment, individual bugs and their interactions were easy to identify because numbers were printed on the bugs. Now it says given a list of bug interactions, so decide whether the experiment supports his assumption of two genders with no homosexual bugs, or if it contains some bug interaction that falsify this. So what it is trying to say is if there is a bug, say with number 1 and 2, then 1 and 2 have different genders, so they cannot have same gender. But so if I assume 1 as male and 2 as female, so later on I cannot have two males interacting with each other. Okay, I can only have a male interacting with a female. That I have to check. So I can consider this as a bipartite model in which the males are colored blue and the females are colored, say, with any other color, maybe green. And then I have to check if it is possible to divide my graph into two different sets of males of two different sets of vertices, such that in one set all the nodes or all the bugs that are present are male, and in the different set all the bugs or all the nodes that are present are female. And there should be no interaction between male bugs and there should be no interaction between female bugs. So I have to check if it is possible or not. Okay, so let us try coding it. Let us try to code it. So let us name it bug.cpp, and then I write the header files. Let us see the format of the question. It says first there are a few test cases. So let us take the test cases. And then I have to construct a graph. So let us take my graph, which say is having this much nodes, and I will have to maintain a visited array, which will be initially false. Or maybe I can visit, or maybe I can define it here only. And then I have to initialize a vector for coloring. So let us color all of them with 0. And then I need to take the input. So the input will be n and e. So I input n, then I input e, and then I also need to clear my graph. So I take a loop from 0 to this value, and then I do graph of I dot clear. So let us clear my graph, and then I just loop through all the edges. Then I take input of the values, and then I simply push back B into this, and then I simply push back this. So let us write a function is bipartite, and then I start from the root node, and then I pass a color, say C. So again, I travel through all, I travel through all the nodes that are directly connected to. Okay, so basically I'll have to also pass the vectors, using ampersand. This is a Boolean vector using ampersand viz, and then ampersand, this is the color vector. So first what I do is I first check if it is visited or not. So if it is not visited, I mean if X is not visited, then I check if the DFS call for X returns me false or not. So I take the XOR of it with 1, and then I pass viz, and then, so if this is false, then I should simply return false. If it returns, like if the DFS call returns me false. Else what I should do is, if I should check that if the visit, like if X is visited and the color of X is same as the color of the root node, then I should return false, because it cannot be bipartite then. Else I should simply return true. And here I should mark root as visited, and then the color of root as C. Okay. Let us see how we need to print this. So we need to print like this. Okay, we need to print something like this. Let us say this is the case, say case. Or you can say test case. And then I check if, let us say, is, so let us say I mark it as, I initially marked it as true. And then for every bug, say from one, all the bugs, I check if the visited is, like if it is not visited, then I check if it is bipartite. So if bipartite of I start from I, and then let us color it with 0, and then let us pass viz, and then let us pass color, and if it is false, then my is becomes false. And then finally, if is, I mean if it is still, I mean if my graph is bipartite, then I should simply print that no suspicious bugs were found, else I should print suspicious bugs found. So okay, what error is it showing? Oh, sorry, I I just called the wrong function. It should be is bipartite. It shouldn't be DFS. Yeah. So let us try running it once. So scenario 1, suspicious bugs found. Then scenario 2, no suspicious bugs found. So it is printing correctly. Let us try submitting it. Let us try submitting it. we should select C++ 14 and then let us print it and then let us try submitting it. So yeah, so you can see it got accepted. So using, like checking if my graph is bipartite or not simply helped me solve this complex problem, because without checking for bipartiteness, I think it seemed nearly impossible for me to solve this problem. But yeah, like if I can think, or maybe I can relate it somehow with this bipartite concept, then the problem became really easy. Because I think we should probably stop now, because or else you can just watch this bipartiteness. I mean, how it basically works. Like it starts from 0 and then it goes to 1. Like it colors 0 with orange color and then it goes to 1. It colors it with a different color, then it goes to 2. Then it colors 2 with a different color, say orange. Then it goes to 3. After going to 3, it colors 3 with a color, but it matches. I mean, but these two notes, the color of these two notes match. So it simply stops here and it prints not bipartite. So it exists. So if you're having an odd length cycle, then your graph can never be bipartite. So this is something that you should keep in mind. Yeah. So maybe I think that's all about today's session. Probably we should end this meeting now.